Well, welcome back. Today is going to be a little bit different. I didn't manage to do Death Diary 4 in time because I was on a business trip. However, the development team has decided to, obviously, whilst I was going to put a Death Diary out there, and of course also today, so I'll be merging Death Diary 4 and Death Diary 5 into one unit. We're going to be talking, first of all, about Death Diary number 4, which is about the different types of units of an army you can have within the game. Now, Imperator, as it looks like right now, is very much going to be a war-based game, a little bit more complex than, say, Crusader Kings or Europa Universalis. Not as complicated as Hearts of Iron 4, because obviously you can't really put all your eggs in that war basket, because obviously you have trade and scheming and politics on the side, so we're not really going to go that deep. First of all, we have a slew of units that are going to be available to your army, and they're basically unit types. It doesn't necessarily mean that these are a proper representation of that army group. Say, for instance, archers could also be slingers, mainly because archers were not, as far as I know, not particularly effectively used during the Roman period, and we had more slingers during that era, but that's just more of a sake of arguing. So, speaking of archers, archers are units that can assault, which means that they can attack very easily, and they'll stay in defense on the second row. Second row basically means is that they are behind the first attack row of a army, and basically have a little bit more defense than the average unit that is in the front, say your Legionnaire. Speaking of Legionnaires and heavy infantry, these units are assaulting and of course sitting in the first line. Apparently you can only build heavy infantry if you have iron trade goods, so if you don't have iron, then you are going to be running in some problems. Another example of heavy infantry are the Greek hoplites, for instance, as well. Then we have the flank units, such as camels and cavalry, which is always very good. And, of course, light cavalry is also part of that. You'll need horses for that. Or for, of course, camels, you'll need camels. Relatively quick to build, but are rather expensive, and obviously considered their flanking units, you will need to be really careful around that as well, and they have their own counters, which is something you'll need to watch out for. Then there's a special unit, which is the chariot. The chariot will only be buildable by the Celtic or Mauryan traditions, so if you are Celtic or Mauryan, you will have access to chariots if you have unlocked the right tech. Apparently they're very cheap and very good against light infantry, but everything else, they are not that great. In terms of light infantry, a good example would probably be Gladiator, where a couple of dudes get cut in half, or girls, let's put it that way. Not very good. Horse archers, which are also attacking from the second row. You'll need steppe horde trade goods in order to be able to build this one, and apparently similar cost to cavalry, and they are very, very deadly to slower moving units, as Crassus found out as he decided to go into Persia and get completely annihilated by, well, horse archers. This is why you don't take a legion out of Syria, Crassus. That's why you completely avoid this sort of situation. Before you know it, your mouth gets poured full of gold, and your head gets to be put on a stick. Let's take a look here. Then we have other special versions like war elephants, which are most likely going to be available to the troops of Carthage. India as well, of course. Different trade goods available there, which makes life very, very interesting. Apparently also very good versus units that cannot run away quickly, such as cavalry. Of course, cavalry, infantry, of course. Cavalry, of course, will most likely be able to get away from these relatively quickly. Light infantry, we already talked about these. They're very cheap, quick to build, but they're weak versus pretty much everyone. Expect to spend quite a lot of time using these in the earlier game if you're playing as Rome. And the Marian events haven't, well, the Marian reforms haven't happened yet, so please be aware of that. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff regarding well, let's put it this way, modding the game, a bunch of code here. In this particular case, archers, whether or not they are an army, whether or not they can assault, what rank they are in. So you could totally change this into first or second rank, what their maneuvering speed is, what their movement speed is, how much they will cost, how long they will take to build, etc., etc., as well as their bonus modifier versus other army types, such as in this particular case. Final numbers, of course, never final. Light infantry, they do a 2 times bonus to. Heavy infantry, a 1.25 bonus to. Cavalry, a reduced amount of bonus. War elephant, just 1. Horse archers, 1. And archers by themselves, 1 as well. Of course, this is most likely not going to be a full overview of all the army types that are going to be available in the base game, considering the entire game spans quite a lot of time and space. Expect a slew more things to come out. Of course, these are more like in the category of types of units. In terms of flavor, they'll probably be a little bit more varied, say Spartan under heavy infantry, etc., etc. So it's at some point it just becomes a naming convention that can be changed through mod files and whatnot. Then we're going to talk about Dev Diary number 5, which is about population, or POPs, as it's also known in both Victoria and Rome Universalis, which was the original game where this was basically based on. Stellaris also has a pop system, which is, from what I understand, not nearly as in-depth here, but every single pop has its own religion, its culture, and happiness. So yes, there are going to be slews of minorities within your empire that you will have to potentially convert in order to become, well, a stable and happy imperium, because a population that is not united is a population that is divided. So that's something you want to keep in the back of your head. So there's several ways of increasing happiness of pops, which is ideas, invention, and certain trade goods. Of course, those delinquent Romans, those decadent Romans need their wine in their games, so expect such trade goods to be there, and if they don't have them, they will not be happy. So maybe if you blockade them off, then maybe you can get some sort of internal revolt. Being in the same culture group for pops is also very helpful, and if they belong to another religion, then those pagans must burn, and we will not be happy with them being there. Happiness will impact 2 things on pops. Pops happiness is directly influencing how productivity they have. So if you have happy pops, they will be working harder, which means they generate more goods, which means that you can transfer more goods to other areas, which then are happier, etc., etc. It's kind of a loop over there. Of course, if you have low happiness, then unrest will increase in the city, and before you know it, you will have some sort of a revolt on your hands, and then you'll need to send in the legions to cut them down and make an example out of them, which sometimes is probably a good idea, but in general, I don't think you want to really be that guy. Let's put it that way. Now, when we're talking about pops, there's 4 of them within the game. There are citizens, freemen, tribesmen, and slaves. Citizens are basically your nobility, your patricians, basically the creme de la creme, the guys that live up in the ivory towers looking up down upon the peasantry and the rabble in general. Freemen, they are manpower, they are the plebs, and basically they... yeah, they are included. The plebs are included in there, and they're basically your workers. They generate your goods. They generate your manpower, etc., etc. Of course, citizens, which I didn't mention, generate research and commerce. So didn't mention that. So that doesn't fall under freemen right there. Then there's tribesmen. They are barbarians on the uncivilized reaches of your Imperium. Apparently they give a little bit of manpower and tax, but it doesn't mean that we can't use a little bit of goodwill to turn these savages into proper Romans at some point in time. And then, of course, there's slaves. What are you going to do with slaves? Well, they generate tax, and that's pretty much it, really. Tax as in they work, therefore you get goods, and therefore you can sell them, therefore you have tax. They work hard. I'm sure they'll be just fine. Now, whilst you're in a city, there will always be a pop that is growing or in decline, depending on the population growth of the city. So when a pop is completely grown or totally dead, then either a current pop is picked for def or a new random pop is created that will slowly grow. Okay, that is interesting. I'm just reading this off from the def diary at the moment here because this line, to me, is a little bit confusing, but basically what it means is that a pop will generally be growing or it will be dying. Who knows? It's like Schrödinger's cat. You don't know until you see it. Now, terrain, civilization value, amount of pops in city, access to trade goods impact a city growth, which is classic for any sort of empire building game. If you have the resources, then your population will grow. That's how it has been since the dawn of time, since the Mesopotamian era, where the first cities were set. If you have goods, then they will grow. If you do not have goods, then they will most likely shrink, or at least if you don't have the basic ones. And of course, in this picture, you also see that some of the faiths are growing as well, and well, that's basically set to yeah, a bunch of modifiers. So there's a base modifier. Apparently there's a forest modifier in this case, grain, fish, civilization value, and city population. So I guess the bigger the city is, the slower the population will grow, as it is generally the case in some of the other PDX games. Also, you can gain pops through welfare. As you sack cities, you will generate slaves, which is great. And yeah, some of their pops will go back towards your main capital and your provincial capital as slaves. Good times. When a city becomes formally yours, the city's citizens become freemen, and the freemen become slaves. So it's like a knockdown effect. There are no patricians in any captured cities unless you promote them. So you can use your oratory or religious power to basically upgrade your citizens within a city. So if you want to turn a freeman into a citizen, it will cost you 10 oratory power. Look at the powers videos for more details. Or a slave into a freeman, it will cost you a bunch of religious power, because clearly slaves are faithless husks that do not have anything, and it takes the strength of a Roman in order to get the power of the gods inside of his mind. So yeah, we're going to be apparently be talking more about pops in the future and basically what they do, but this is more of a generalized overview of what pops will do within the context of Imperator and all of that jazz. Now there's a bunch of mod stuff related here, basically how many pop types they will want in cities. Also, how much manpower costs, or how much is going to cost to promote them to citizens, and where they demote to, which is kind of cool. There's a bunch of other things, like the price mechanics, how much is going to cost in order to upgrade or downgrade them, how much manpower you get from a certain pop, and how many military points you can get, or how much tax they generate. It is all open for modding to the community at large, and I'm sure that there's already people out there that are like, you know what, this sounds awesome, I'm gonna build a Song of Ice and Fire mod around this. Well, that's a good call for you, good sir, and I'm looking forward to it. Next week, we're going to be talking about the economy system within the game, which is one of the things that I am very excited about. Let's hope that it's going to be as nicely and complex as the Victoria series was back in good old Victoria 2. I doubt we'll ever see a sequel to that, but we shall see. Regardless, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and or subscribe, or come and join us on our Discord channel. There's literally thousands of us now on here since the last time that I promoted this. So yeah, come hang out. Let's talk a little bit about video games. We got Stellaris on there, we got a little bit of Civ on there, we got a little bit of well, Imperator on there, and all that jazz. So feel free to pop around and say hi and join the Discord. But in the meantime, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves and, as always, each other.